Good afternoon, and welcome to this Break the Norm Leadership Lunch and Learn about developing as a manager and as a leader. My name is Ramian Pierre. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Break the Norm Leadership, and we're going to spend about 30 minutes today talking about this topic of developing and managing as a leader. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get started. I hope that this is a beneficial experience for you. There are more lunch and learns that we have recordings of and handouts from. If you're joining us for the first time, I will drop the link for that into the chat, but you can go to breakthenormleadership.com/LNL, Largo, Nevada, Largo. And you could see past lunch and learns that we've had, download the handouts from those, watch those recordings. I will be referencing one of those in particular during this session, so I wanted to make sure you had that link. And the last announcement is if you want to have a lunch and learn on a particular topic, we're more than happy to accommodate you. And you can make those arrangements through my colleague Rachel, the CEO of BreakTheNormLeadership.com, Break the Norm Leadership, and you can reach her at Rachel at BreakTheNormLeadership.com. With that, I'm just going to dive in first by sharing a little personal stuff. So, uh, for this session, you might be assuming, reasonably so, that I would come in with a list or a framework or a checklist of how to develop yourself as a manager and how to develop yourself as a leader. And typically that's what I would do. But I had a big aha moment about 2 weeks ago while delivering a program for a client. And it really had to do with, maybe that's not the first question or the most important question to focus on. Maybe the most important question to focus on is um, like how to even think about developing as a manager and a leader. So I realized that I was in the middle or am in the midst of making a mind shift change around developing myself as a manager and a leader. And I wanted to share that experience, this aha, with you, in part because I know as an educator that one of the best ways for me to learn something is to try and teach it to somebody else. So this session is partly for me, but I also think it provides some value to you. So let me start this way um, by talking about what is the challenge or opportunity or problem we're really trying to address here. And with this session today, I think what we're really trying to talk about is what does it mean to develop as a manager and as a leader? So I'm going to ask you to do a quick exercise with me. Um, it's an imagination one, but you don't have to close your eyes. I'm not going to make you do that. But what I'd like you to do is just take 45 seconds and think about a great leader in your life. Maybe it's somebody that you've worked with or worked for. Maybe it's someone who you know personally. Maybe it's even like someone who you've never met. It could be a leader who you admire from afar. But I just want you to think about that leader, and I want you to imagine or envision her or him in your mind. What do they look like? What do they say? What types of things do they do that make you feel like they're a good leader? And actually, that last question, like, how do they make you feel? I just want you to sit in this for 30 more seconds. What is it like to experience a great leader? When you think of a great leader, who do you think of? When you think of a great leader, how do they make you feel? When you think of a great leader, what kinds of things do they say or do? Let's just sit in um, our recollection of a great leader we've experienced or are experiencing right now. Okay, now hold on to that for a minute while I tell you this. So I thought about this, and I've worked with some amazing leaders. I've know of and known of some amazing leaders as well. And the person that I really come to time and time again is a former boss of mine, Moira Kelly. Not the actress Moira Kelly, but um, my Moira Kelly, I think is even better. She was my boss when I was working at a summer program in Massachusetts, and uh, and what I just really admired how very, very smart Moira was. And smart in like the I don't know, the technical sense of the word, but also smart in the ability to see the big vision. Like I could focus on, I don't know, um, what was right in front of me, what was maybe an hour or two, or maybe a week or two ahead of me. But it felt like Moira could see like months ahead, or maybe even years ahead. She just had such a great vision. So it just seemed like, from my point of view, that everything lined up. That when she, like, actually, speaking of vision, she had a great ability to convey vision, and she did so in a way that made me want to work for her even more, or want to work harder for her even more. And I really, this really came home for me when I went to graduate school the second time. This was time it was at a institution of higher learning outside of Boston, and I was taking a communication class, and the professor had every one of us go through a quick simulation where he pretended, it was basically a role play situation where he gave us a scenario and said, you need to communicate these three things to me as I'm role playing the situation where you're my supervisor and I'm your employee. So I get the sheet. He says, sit down in the chair. I sit down in the chair. And he immediately dives into the role play. And what he asked for me to communicate were these three things. I get through thing number one, thing number two. It takes me like a few more seconds. I get through thing number three, and he like, immediately stops us. It maybe took like 90 seconds. And he said, great. And he kicked me out. We go through the whole class. Everyone comes back in. Um, and he says to me, so Ramian, you did this, you were first, and you did it all in like 90 seconds or so. How were you able to do that? And I asked because he's literally had done this experiment, this exercise with thousands of people, he said. And he said typically, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong, 80% of people would communicate one of the three things, even though they had them written down on a script. And something like 50% of the people would communicate two of the three things that were on the list. But he said like only like something ridiculously low, like 20% or less would communicate all three things. And he said, how did you do it? Like, what were you thinking? What was the self-talk in your head? And I told him in the class, in all honesty, I was thinking, what would Moira do? One of the things I admired about her was how she could say really hard things in a way that um, not only weren't hurtful, but also were inspirational. So yeah, I just used her as my inspiration. So that was my leadership model. Now you had a leadership person in your head. I'm going to ask you to put that aside for one more second, not one more second, literally, but figuratively, while I ask you to do this bit of imagining. Now, I want you to do the same thing. Think of what a great person said. What did they do? How did they make you feel? But instead of it being a great leader, I want you to think of a great manager. Think about a great manager that you've worked with, worked for, um, worked beside, or that you just admire. Think of this great manager and what did she or he say or do? How did she or he make you feel? I just want you to hold on to that idea for a second. So just silently think about, you did a great leader. Now think about, what's a great manager like? Just sit with that for 15 seconds or so. Okay. Now, I don't know if it was easier or harder, or there was no difference for you between thinking of a great leader or for a great manager, but I really struggle with that. Like I feel like management's important, but I just struggled identifying with a good manager, thinking one in my head. And that led me to really thinking about, what does it mean to be a good leader? What does it mean to be a good manager? What's the difference? And that's really where I want to start with my ahas. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So what you have here is a image of a train. And I like this image. One, I like the old-timey trains because they, even though they're passenger trains, they feel like they're doing work. So I feel like it's appropriate for this exercise. And the way I think about the difference between a manager and a leader is that a leader will set the destination for the train. A leader will inspire people to get onto the train. A leader will inspire people to stay on the train as it moves toward the destination. What a great manager does is make sure the train is running, make sure the train runs on time, make sure people are comfortable on the train, Make sure no other trains are conflicting with this train or slow it down. Make sure that all the stuff that you want to take to the destination is on the train with you. And those are two very, very important jobs and also very, very different. Um, and while I like um, both of them, I realized, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, that I have really been developing myself as, or trying to develop myself as the best manager I could be. Um, uh, Whereas my time and efforts and energy would be better spent, and I would serve others, other people, other organizations, other teams better if I spent more time and energy focused on developing myself as a leader. Um, because when you look at this image of a train and think about the manager job, the manager in the sense that she is making sure the train runs on time, that all the people's stuff is on the train, that the train ride is comfortable, all of those things. That essentially what a manager does is a manager. Um, they keep the trains running, but they do that by making plans. They do that by solving problems. They do that by organizing people and things. And there's a piece of me that really loves all that work. That it's really taking things that are complex and simplifying them. And that's one of the things I love to do. Years ago, in a previous job, I had the opportunity to interview um, Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. And he had this concept that I was really intrigued by. He said that there are two types of people in this world, simplifiers and optimizers. And he used the example of going to the market to describe the difference between the two. He said, if you tell a simplifier to go to the market and get a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a carton of eggs, the simplifier would go to the market and get a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a carton of eggs. You send an optimizer to the market to go get a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a gallon of eggs. They'll get your loaf of bread, carton of milk, and gallon of eggs. And along the way there, they may drop off the dry cleaning that's been sitting in the closet for 2 weeks. They may pick up the lawnmower you loaned to your neighbor around the corner, but they haven't returned yet. They'll find a bunch of ways to optimize the trip, the opportunity. And if everything works out, it is a trip that has solved like 18 problems or checked off 18 different boxes. If anything goes wrong, though, it's like a what could have been a 20-minute trip to get a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a carton of eggs has turned into like a 3-hour tour like Gilligan's Island. And he said that um, when I was talking to him about this idea, optimizers versus simplifiers, I asked him then, so who should supervise who? Like if I'm in an organization, do I want my optimizer supervising my supervise my simplifiers or the other way around, simplifiers supervising optimizers? And he said, oh, you always want simplifiers supervising optimizers because the optimizers
Hmm.
will sort of give you the universe of things and the
There we
simplifiers
go.
will bring it down to, sorry, I'm just muting a few people, will bring it down to what is practical and can be done. All right. So I got really it sort of affirmed my, oh, I want to be a simplifier because I can make sense of things and that is of value to organizations and people. But what we didn't talk about in that conversation and the aha I had last week is, what does leadership really mean? Like, what does it really mean to inspire people? Well, yeah, it's getting them on the train. Yeah, it's keeping them on the train. Yeah, it's setting the destination for the train. But what it really is about in most business settings is it's about getting results from people and doing that through influence. So getting results from people. Um, if you had a team that could organize itself to get results, they wouldn't need a leader. Um, but many teams, many orgs do. So leaders are definitely getting results. They're getting results through others because it's not only them doing the work, it's really a situation where their scorecard, what they're being evaluated on is their ability to help other people get the work done. So leaders are essentially people who influence. Now, sometimes there's that phrase used, influencing without authority. Now, leaders tend to have positional authority. I would argue that they don't always want to use it even when they have it, that it's so much better to influence outside of your positional authority because it helps people be motivated. Like leaders have to figure out a way to motivate people that doesn't involve forcing them. Because When you force people, you're not getting motivated people, you're getting compliant people. And compliant folks will do the least. Compliant folks will cut corners. Compliant folks will stop working when your back is turned. But motivated folks, if you can tap into what their internal motivation is, their intrinsic motivation, motivated folks will keep going because you've just fired up the engine. So you end up being a force multiplier in terms of your impact, right? You can do more because you're using more people, you're not just relying on yourself. And that was my big aha. I have been spending so much time developing myself as a manager and doing the work myself. I haven't been developing people, developing teams in such a way that they can do the work without me. I haven't been inspirational enough, uh, and I haven't been motivational enough. So I did or I did some more talking, some more thinking with some folks, and this idea of influence, like I need to figure out a way, or most people need to figure out a way to develop their influence muscles, because um, most people, teams, and organizations are over managed and under led. I'm going to say that again. Most people, organizations, and teams are over managed. We're worried so much about the logistics, the operations, um, that we forget to overlead, which is the motivate, inspire, and help. And when I say help, I mean helping people, organizations, and teams cope with change, accept the change, and cope with it. So when you think about it, leaders are really focused on being change leaders through influence, change agents through influence, whereas managers are really focused on simplifying complex issues to through solving problems, making plans, organizing, things like that. And so I want to spend a little time talking about how you can make that shift in your thinking, because a lot of folks wait until they're in a positional leadership position to figure this out, or just before they get into a positional leadership position to figure out, hey, I need to spend less time managing and more time leading. And that leads me to the next image I want to share with you. Now, I don't know if you all recognize this, but this is an image from my childhood. Now, in previous Lunch and Learns, I've talked about how I was an introvert with stranger danger and also a latchkey kid. That's absolutely true. One of the few things, and I don't say few. One of the things I do remember a lot is I really enjoyed the merry-go-round, playing on the merry-go-round at playgrounds. And this is like out of my head and found on the internet, but out of my head, an image about what those merry-go-rounds look like. Except in my memory, they were always green. And they look looking at this image in 2024, this looks like a death trap. And they probably were, because basically what would happen is you get a bunch of little kids running around holding on to this, then they all like jump on, like put their legs through the U and on either side of that pole in the middle, and like hang on for dear life as you're spinning at 30 miles an hour. Inevitably, like someone's gonna get thrown off. They have sand here, but I don't think we had sand back then. Or you just like get off and then you try and walk, but you end up like doing that wobbly, I'm completely disoriented walk. And I picked this image because I wanted to make the point that you can develop your influence skills early on in life. Because if you look at any kid's playground, kids are practicing influence with their peers. Now, go back in time to when I had one of these and or not had, but when I used one of these. Yes, they are dangerous and they were the best. Like two things can be true at once. Um, but these kids, you'll see some kids who are sort of the leader of the group, and what are they doing? They're convincing other kids to hop on the merry-go-round, or hop on the slide, or hop on the monkey bars, or hop on the swings. Like they're using influential skills, and they're kids, 8 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, and if they can do it, we can too. It really got me thinking that I started my first job, as a middle school history teacher, let's say my first real job out of college as a middle school history teacher, I was slowly beginning to develop my influence skills. Can't make kids do homework. Can threaten them, but you can't make them do homework. So there was a bit of negotiation and convincing. You can't even make them do classwork, because 12 and 13-year-olds, they will do what they want to do in so many ways. But like what we should all be thinking about, or what I'm offering us all to think about is like entry level positions is the time to start developing your peer-to-peer influencing skills, your ability to influence without positional authority, because that's actually setting you up for leadership. Don't wait until you're just about to get a leadership position or getting that promotion. Develop those skills ahead of time. Now, I feel like some people got that memo from their families, from their I don't know, from their mentors, but I didn't. I got the keep your head down, do great work, and eventually you'll get ahead. And what I've learned since is that helps you get ahead in terms of the management vertical, but not necessarily in terms of leadership. So I'm doing some rethinking about how I develop my personally develop my skills around management and leadership, how much time and energy I want to spend doing those things. Because I think you'll know this is true once I say it, things that you spend time and energy on grow, they expand. And so for me, I want to spend more time leading and practicing leadership, even if it means I'm going to spend less time managing. And that leads me to my last graphic. Um, it's a little bit askew, but that's pretty much been my month, a bit askew. I want you to do this. Think about the last 2 weeks of your work life. So today's July 16th. So go back to July the 2nd. Let's think about your last 2 weeks. Actually, just go back the whole month. When you look at this month so far, um, that week of July 1st, that week of July 8th, even though there's a vacation in there, think about what you've done in at work. Maybe you could even pull up your calendar and just take a quick look at your calendar. Because what I want you to think of is this. Assume for a moment that all of your work time is spent either managing or leading. Let's say that equals 100% of your work time. How would you divide up that ratio? When you look back on the last 2 weeks, how much of your time have you spent managing, doing things like solving problems, making plans, organizing people, making the complex simple? And how much time have you spent leading? How much time have you spent helping people and organizations deal and cope with change? How much time have you spent inspiring people? And when I looked at my calendar for the last 2 weeks, I realized I've spent virtually all of my time managing and relatively little time leading. And then I asked myself, what are the results that I've gotten from that? And that's where things got really interesting for me because I realized even though I've only spent a little time leading, I've really enjoyed it. Like watching the light go on in somebody else behind someone else's eyes about a project we're doing or about the future we're trying to create. It felt really good at the time. It was really motivating afterwards. I will admit it was a little bit daunting ahead of time. Like, how am I going to motivate this person? How am I going to have this conversation? But having it got both of us motivated, both of us energized, both of us more productive. Whereas when I think about the results I've gotten from all of the management work that I've done, I realized, I've gotten a lot of things done. I've been able to check off a lot of things on my list, and there's a piece of me that feels incredibly satisfied by that. That the another result, another impact of me spending so much time managing is that I'm a bit exhausted. I'm tired. It's hard work because it feels like everything's on my shoulders because literally I'm putting everything on my shoulders. I'm making things simple. I'm solving the problems instead of finding ways to inspire others to solve them with me or for themselves. So my big takeaway was like, hey, even though I've been spending only a little bit of time doing it, I like the feeling of leading. I just need to practice it a bit more. And it doesn't need to be like a big performative gesture. I don't need to spend 80% of my time leading, whereas I was only spending like maybe 5% of my time leading before. I just need to make a little incremental shift. Um, and for me, the practice I'm committing to, or at least between now and the next lunch and learn, is I'm planning on carving out time. Right now, I'm going to carve out an hour a week to do some future thinking and some future conversations with people on my teams. Like, what could we be doing, and how can I motivate my teams to be um, well, motivated to go to that destination, motivated to get on the train and stay on the train. motivated maybe even to drive the train or be the manager of the train. So I don't know how I'm going to get there in terms of the details. I don't know what the results are going to be, but what I realize is if I spend time and energy on it, I'm likely to get some good results. All right. So let me stop sharing for a moment so I can just give you a summary of what we've done. I talked about how it's not the difference between leadership and management is that managers keep the trains running, leaders inspire people to get on the train and stay on the train, and also set the destination. That managers or our management function is about solving problems, organizing people, making plans, simplifying the complex. Whereas leadership is really about helping people, organizations, and teams cope with change, prepare for change, and cope with change. And that many of us wait to develop our leadership skills, which are really influencing without authority skills, until we are in a leadership position or until just before. And that's way too late. We should start much, much earlier when we're in entry level jobs, learning how to influence our peers, just like kids on the death trap merry-go-round learned how to influence each other to get onto the merry-go-round and stay on as long as possible. Um, and when I looked back at and another thing, one way you can quickly see how much time or energy you're spending on leading versus managing is to literally look at your calendar and just see how have you been spending your time during the workday. And in terms of making a change, I'm trying incremental, just adding a little bit more time to leading, finding ways to inspire others, helping them manage change, that type of work. And I'm going to see what the results are after 30 days. All right, folks. That's what I've got for you today. It's been 29 minutes. Again, I'll say this. Oh, wait, let me say one more thing about influence because the manager in me can't help himself. Um, if you go back or go to, if you've never been there, to our Break the Norm leadership website. I'm dropping the link in the chat. If you go to, it was the November of last year session on influencing without authority. Actually, let me share my screen. I'll share this really quickly. Um, do, 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 do. Here we go. And it's a bit small, but there's a handout that you can download from that session if you go to the website. And this is helpful in terms of it talks through a particular framework for influence that I find very helpful. I don't know if you know this book, Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think it's a great text around how can you influence um, and influence for good or bad. So you need to use your influence powers for good and not for evil. And this handout is based on that work. So if you don't have time to read this whole thing, start by skimming this handout. It has the principles that the 7 principles that Cialdini says are can be pivotal in terms of impacting others, influence when you don't have authority. It also has where did I put it? Here it is. A decision tree that if you, depending on what you're trying to do, you want to pull different levers of these seven principles. So it actually walks you through like 5 questions to help you figure out which influence tactic is the best for your given situation. Anyway, that might be a helpful tool for you in your pursuit of developing yourself more as a leader, even as you keep practicing good management. All right, I am done with that. I had to get that manager impulse out. Um, I hope that this has been worth your time and attention. I'm going to stop the recording and encourage folks to sign off and have an awesome day. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we'll see you next month for our next topic. All right, please take care.
Thank you.